really looking forward to hearing you tonight. And
yeah, thanks for having me. All right, thank you, Henrietta and Jeremy and everybody at Evolver Learning Lab for inviting MAPS on board to do this course, which is, just a reminder, our second webinar that we've done with Evolver Learning Lab. The last one was hugely successful. I learned just now that there's over 300 people signed up for this webinar, which is really amazing. We have almost 100 people online right now. Clearly, these conversations about psychedelics and spirituality and science are conversations that a lot of people are interested in having. I'd be curious to know, although I don't know if there's a way to find out right now, how many people are in different parts of the country. These webinars, I think, are a great opportunity for people who live in communities where open conversations about psychedelics are not something that they can engage in for personal reasons, professional reasons, and so on. The stigma associated with even having conversations about psychedelics is still quite strong in some places, even though we're making a lot of advancement with the clinical trials that MAPS and others are working on, and the public education and the media coverage surrounding it. So thank you all for being willing to sign on and join us. As you all know, a portion of the proceeds from this go directly to supporting MAPS's research. We have ongoing research right now looking at MDMA combined with psychotherapy for the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder, which we'll be talking quite a bit about tonight. And we also have other studies, other research efforts, events, and psychedelic harm reduction all over the world. So for those who are just joining us and weren't able to join us last time, MAPS is a nonprofit research organization. We sponsor research, clinical trials all over the world, with our main focus being developing MDMA-assisted psychotherapy into a legal, FDA-approved prescription treatment for PTSD. There's been quite a bit of media coverage about this recently. We're currently expecting that the treatment using MDMA combined with psychotherapy could be approved for prescription use, covered by insurance, for the treatment of PTSD as early as 2021. By the end of our current series of trials, we will have treated over 100 participants in these trials, and so far over 1,000 people have received pure MDMA in clinical trials. So we know quite a bit about the safety and the relative effectiveness of MDMA combined with psychotherapy for the treatment of PTSD. Today, we're going to be talking with Nicholas Blackston. Thank you for joining us, Nicholas, and taking the time today to join us. And we'll also be speaking with Ryan LeCompte, who's another U.S. Marine veteran who's been working very closely with MAPS to promote the beneficial uses of psychedelics, particularly for veterans. Ryan is the founder of Veterans for Entheogenic Therapy, a group that's been promoting the education, the public education and the treatment of veterans with marijuana and ayahuasca and MDMA. So today is Veterans Day. This is the first time that MAPS has done something officially for Veterans Day, and we wanted to take this opportunity to speak directly with two of the guys who have really been helping open up the public conversation about PTSD and about how psychedelic therapy can be part of that. Personally, I just want to say, that we're extremely grateful for the work that Nicholas and Ryan and the other veterans have put in here, not necessarily for going out and fighting in the wars, but more importantly, for coming back and doing the work, the very, very hard work that it takes to reintegrate back into their lives, recover from PTSD, and educate all of us about how that process can work. So the topic of this course is really a practical one. So how can we take some of these lessons and apply them to our lives? Lessons about healing from psychedelic therapy, healing from PTSD, and the role of spirituality in that healing. How can we apply that to our lives and learn maybe how to take some of our psychedelic experiences, some of our spiritual experiences, and use those as opportunities for healing. So I want to just help us be as specific as possible. What are some of the processes, the techniques? What have we learned in psychedelic therapy? Nicholas, you'll be speaking a little bit about your experience with MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, and Ryan will be speaking about ayahuasca, two very, very different substances with very different mechanisms of actions, very different contexts of use, but both areas where we've seen people be able to recover, if not in a short term, certainly over the long term, from PTSD. So, quick reminder, this is far from our last session. We have 3 more sessions after this. Just before jumping into the conversation here, I'll go over that real quick. Our next session is going to be December 2nd. We're going to skip a couple of weeks. We'll be skipping next week because most of the MAPS staff will be attending the International Drug Policy Alliance conference in Washington, D.C. I saw somebody ask that question. We'll have some MAPS representatives there talking about how psychedelic research and medical cannabis research is playing into current policy changes, specifically related to psychedelics and cannabis. Then we'll be skipping the week of the 23rd. That's Thanksgiving week, so a lot of people will be on vacation or seeing family and not able to attend. So we'll be back again on December 2nd, and we'll be talking about discovering plant medicines, and specifically the role of plant medicines, psilocybin, ayahuasca, cannabis, and so on. With 2 amazing women who I've met through the Women's Visionary Congress. Encourage everybody to look that up. It's a really great organization that's doing amazing work bringing women into the conversation about psychedelics and visionary experiences. So that's our December 2nd, Discovering Plant Medicines with Sita Ramaya Sita and Jane Straight. Followed by that, on December 9th, we'll be talking about end-of-life experiences. We'll be talking about how spirituality plays into psychedelic therapy to help people reduce their anxiety about death. Whereas PTSD is something that fortunately not everybody is going to experience. I feel that end-of-life anxiety is something that we can all understand. It's something that we all have to think about. So I'm especially excited for that course as well. We'll be talking with 2 researchers, 2 therapists in MAPS's current trials. One is Julaine Andreas, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist working in our current study of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for anxiety associated with life-threatening illness. And then we'll also be speaking with Donna Dreyer, who's a psychiatrist in Canada who's working on an ongoing study of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD and has also worked with LSD-assisted psychotherapy for end-of-life anxiety. Our last session on December 16th will be releasing the Hungry Ghosts. We'll be talking about addiction. We'll be talking about the spiritual aspects of recovering from addiction through psychedelic experiences and through psychedelic therapy. We'll be speaking with Kevin Franciotti, my friend who participated in a MAP-sponsored observational study of ibogaine therapy for opiate addiction. And then also we'll be speaking with my boss and MAPS founder, Rick Doblin, about some of his ibogaine experiences and some of the work that MAPS is doing. Again, that's December 16th. So we have over 100 participants. That's a great sign that we're ready to get started. We're still waiting for Ryan LeCompte to join us, but here we are with Nicholas Blackston. Nicholas has been an outstanding help, one of our foremost advocates, proponents, speaking about his own personal experience. You've done so much, Nicholas, to share your experience, your openness and willingness to share some of the deeper parts of what you've gone through in your process of coming back from war and recovering from PTSD, participating in our clinical trial, being part of the book that quite honestly got me back into pleasure reading. It had been a long time since I've read a book for fun, and this book, Acid Test by Tom Schroeder, LSD, Ecstasy, and the Power to Heal, features Nicholas's story very, very prominently. This book is available at maps.org/store. This is the hardcover. The all-new paperback edition just came out with a new afterword from the author Tom Schroeder. So Nicholas's story is in here, a lot of it, as is the story of a few other people who have been working in the field to help restore psychedelic therapy back to a mainstream place in science and medicine. Nicholas was also part of our crowdfunding video. Last year, we held a crowdfunding campaign to raise the remaining $50,000 that we needed to fund the study in which Nicholas was a participant. We asked for $50,000, and the response from the community was quite unbelievable. We ended up raising over $141,000 for our research. What we didn't need for the veterans study, that went to our study in Boulder, Colorado. Our study in South Carolina, in which Nicholas was a participant, has primarily enrolled veterans, also police officers and firefighters with service-related PTSD. We've also enrolled some female survivors of sexual assault that they experienced while in the military. It's also a form of PTSD, very common, that happens, unfortunately. So I just want to get started here. Nicholas, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Paducah, Kentucky. Love the fact that we can just connect like this. So Nicholas, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nicholas, I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about your background, your experience, how you got involved in the military, where you were deployed, how long you spent, and what it was like coming back.
Sure. Well, I ended up joining the Marine Corps right after high school, graduated in 2004, and that summer I shipped off to Parris Island and graduated in around October. And I, makes a long story short, after going through SOI training, I became a machine gunner, and then I went to the unit, 1st Battalion, 6th Marines, weapons company. And there I did 2 deployments. My first deployment was to Fallujah, Iraq. That was in 2005, right?
Yes.
2005. And then in my second deployment, which was the deployment in which I got wounded, that was to Ramadi, Iraq. And from 2006 into 2006 into 2007, we got extended while we were over there. That was a bulk, I guess, wherever my trauma came from, being in a consistent war zone, day in, day out, getting into firefights. I was a turret gunner for the lead vehicle in our convoy, and so I was in it all the time, and I had to witness a lot of traumatic things, like watching my friends burn alive in their Humvee, and myself being my vehicle being attacked by an enemy RPG. Upon it exploding, my driver died and bled out. I took shrapnel to my butt and legs, and some other people were wounded in the vehicle, but we lost our driver. And so me as a gunner, and that responsibility is to take out the enemy before they harm us. And so getting hit and losing my friend and my driver really, created kind of a grief, a guilt for me, a survivor's guilt. And it was something that I carried with me. Whenever I got out of the Marine Corps, I didn't really notice too much of a, well, actually, it was when I got back, I didn't notice too much. And then it was actually my wife, whose girlfriend at the time, she noticed I just didn't come back the same. And I ended up getting help with the local base there, which is, the therapy wasn't that great. It was the fact that a lot of people are needing to get seen, and they're just kind of rushing you through, so you didn't get your time. And I was able to deal with some stuff there and not be stuck in the Marine Corps. I got my medical stuff taken care of, and then when I got out, things felt a lot better. And then I started school when I was down in South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, and things started kicking back up there, especially when things would naturally trigger talking about the conflict that was going on overseas. And so I started noticing more problems. I went back, this time to the VA, and it was the same pills, same therapy, and these, the pills, they make you feel like a zombie. Of course, they numb a lot of stuff, but they have the dangerous side effect of, when you mix them with alcohol, of really leading to some increased depression and increased anxiety. And a lot of the big issue with me, it was sleep. When you have these nightmares and night terrors, and you don't get the sleep you need, it obviously messes up your day, and then it just compounds. And so they would put you on these tranquilizers that just numbed you, and you became a zombie. And I was able to weaned myself off of that. And I didn't want to be on any medications. I started looking for alternative therapy, and I ended up finding maps online, and timing, the stars were aligned because they were doing the study in Charleston, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. So I was able to call, and I eventually got in, and that's how I ended up getting into the study. And it saved my life, it saved my marriage, and it's opened up my eyes again. When it was dark, now there's light. So that's pretty much how I got involved.
So you were on a lot of medications that were prescribed by the VA?
Yes, I was on like a Zoloft and Seroquel.
Yeah, and you were able to taper off of those before enrolling in the study. Was that a requirement?
Yes, I didn't have to. I was already off of them before, so I didn't have to worry about that. But that was one of the requirements. I naturally got myself off of them. Just the idea of, well, I didn't like anything that was chemically concocted, so I did have a little bit of a hesitancy to going to MDMA because a drug that way, it's not natural like I felt like the mushrooms and the marijuana kind of were the plant teachers, but it opened up I'd had experiences before with mushrooms before I got into MAPS, and when I was trying to find some healing for myself. And so I was familiar with the psychedelic experience. And once that was in, I was able to trust the medicine more and realize it has a great, potential for therapy, really opening up the heart.
Yeah. What was the difference there between the experiences that you'd had before enrolling in the study, say with psilocybin mushrooms and marijuana, and your experience in the study?
But before, I didn't know the importance of being in a good setting and having a safe space, and I didn't go in enough. I had my own form of meditation, I guess, but it was just I was really off by myself and in the woods, and I would go inward, and so I was familiar with, I guess, reading the visions that I got as just like I would read my dream experience, and as that was speaking about what I needed to learn. When I went to the MDMA, I learned the importance of really of having someone there for you, and that safe setting and the environment, and going in more, cutting off my senses, like them putting the headphones on with the music and the eye shades. And it was more of an inward visual, like I was the doctor and the patient kind of experience. And they were just creating that safe healing experience there for me. The psychedelic wise, I feel more of with mushrooms, more of a connective thing to not only the living environment, but the other people and stuff. And for MDMA, I had to reach a point of, I guess, consciousness before I felt that connection with everything else. I feel like when you're taking the mushrooms, you are kind of taking in the consciousness of that plant and stuff. So,
yeah, there's definitely a lot more going on with psilocybin being a natural compound, having a lot of different alkaloids in it. It's a more complex pharmacology than you get just with the MDMA. Although the MDMA has a lot of internal effects, right? It releases a lot of endogenous hormones and stimulates serotonin and reduces activity in the amygdala, and it's doing a lot of things, but it's still just a single compound that is ultimately synthetic. Yeah,
that was the thing about the MDMA that for me is real important, is the fear reduction, because you don't want to talk about a lot of the things that you've seen and experienced, not just because bringing those things up can cause symptoms, anxiety, but you feel like you are supposed to keep those demons locked in you because that's part of, what you did. You didn't need to bring that stuff back home and tell these people what you've seen because of, you just don't want to share. You don't want to open up. And that's what it really helped me reduce the fear and not be so judgmental against myself. I realized that I was the one judging myself for the things that I did. And the MDMA, while it's like being on a dark battlefield, it kind of just takes you up to a height to where it goes over the gunfire, over the screaming, and you get to this altitude, I guess, where you see just how small and insignificant your problems and your plans and what you think are supposed to happen, and that control that you have. And it takes you to a level, I guess, to where you see a bigger picture. And that was, for me, was just, that's what I needed to accept, you know, losing a friend and not being able to stop something that I thought I should be able to stop. I had a problem of reliving that experience over and over again, thinking about what I could change. And it's just like being stuck watching a video and you just can't stop hitting record. I mean, rewind and watching and just over and over again. And then the MDMA just helps you realize there's nothing you could have done. And then you relive the experience without the fear. And now it's been engraved back into you as this positive memory. And it's such a release. It's beautiful.
Wow, that's really beautiful. Yeah, sort of a reprogramming of the memory that happens in the context of the therapy session then.
Yes, I learned a big thing about how it controls your perception so much. Whenever you erase the fear, it's almost like the world is always the same, but it just looks different, you know.
Hmm. Can you say a little bit about how the process worked? It's the MDMA assisted psychotherapy is clearly very different.
Therapy.
Yeah, than just taking a drug every day and hoping your symptoms
Yes.
go away.
You know, one of the things that I get, people think that it's just something they prescribe to you and you took home on your own, and it's not that. I had to. I would have these therapy sessions with Michael and Annie Mithover. And basically to get to know me and to help introduce me to what I was going to be experiencing. So I would have, say in a month's period of the weeks before, I would have these therapy sessions talking. And then that last week of the month, I would actually have a session where I would go in and the beginning of the day, and you take the pill and you stay all day and then end up staying up all night and then have a little talk in the morning. The way the therapy sessions worked is I come in the mornings and come in and talk for like a little bit, and I get prepped up on the nice futon, and they'd have the music and everything set up in the real beautiful environment. One of my favorite things is I love being outside. I've always been like that since a kid, and so they had sunlights in so you could see outside, and it was a very beautiful environment. That's what helps you feel safe. And I naturally felt safe with Michael and Annie there, from getting to know them and everything. And then they give you the drug in like a bowl. It's for me, growing up, I grew up Roman Catholic, so I'm used to, I guess, ceremonial religious like stuff, and them giving it to me like a bowl. It was very ceremonial, very sacred experience. And then taking the pill, of course, it reminds me much of like taking the pills with the Matrix. And once I went in, it was I really didn't know what to experience besides what I experienced with mushrooms. One of the first things I noticed was my panic attacks were coming up. I started feeling this anxiety. But then I heard this voice, which was myself, it was my consciousness that I normally hear. But it just seemed nothing with PTSD. I feel like nothing gets through. Nothing you say to yourself can get through. Nothing your friends and family say. Nothing just gets through. And I heard this voice that said, breathe. And when I breathed through my experience, and like I learned breathing with my nose into my stomach and then out my mouth and doing that cycle of breathing, I just felt the anxiety go away. And then I would feel another wave come on, and I would remember that breathing. And each time I was able to defeat a wave. It's almost like going out into the ocean and you keep hitting those waves, and then you get that last kind of big one, and then you're out there and it's solid. And you know, I came up and I told him about the experience of what I was feeling, how I learned how to defeat just that anxiety with breath, and the power of breath I realized in that moment. And then when I went under, I later came up to tell them about a very beautiful experience where I found this. I realized that I had pushed this part of me into a jail cell. I had punished myself for the things I did. I thought I was, a murderer for having taken lives. I felt that the feelings that I had while pulling the trigger, condemned me to such a state. And then I thought that type of person has no place over here in the States. And so I literally put a part of myself off, you know, and cut part of myself off. And I had this experience where I went down into this dungeon, that cave, and I opened up the jail cell and released this part of myself, and it looked all demonic with red eyes and torn camouflage, you know, camis, and it just it was a beautiful healing experience where I remember just saying, "Forgive me for putting you here, and you could tear me apart if you want to, because I deserve such." But it was a beautiful healing experience where I merged back with a part of myself that I cut off, and then just stuff was clicking inside. I had to take off my headphones and set up, and it's like, I have to tell you about the experience I had. And then it just, on this talk, I mean, some of the videos that they recorded of my sessions, you can just see the process going on. I'm like healing myself by just breathing and going with this flow, and then it's a beautiful experience. And they're there to hear, you know, help you talk about these things. And just my very first session, I felt like, you know, the biggest part of my demons with dealing with, you know, Iraq and the conflict that I went through. And that very first session was just life-changing, just there. And I had the 2 more sessions to do after that. At this point, it's a double blind. They don't know what dosage I was getting. It turned out I was getting the medium dosage, so I had a chance to stay in for 3 more sessions and try the full dosage, which is I think 128 milligrams. And that I was able to dive in, I guess, even deeper. And it wasn't partying, you know, it wasn't ecstasy. It was more like at times like an exorcism. I was you know, releasing these things, and when they would come up, you know, I didn't even know that my body needed to speak, and that my body was speaking sometimes. And you start to become aware of these things that once were subconscious or unconscious, and you allow these parts of your body to breathe and move and express themselves to where, you know, you feel like a kid again. And that's one of those healing feelings, when you get that childlike innocence and forgiveness on yourself again.
I'm wondering, you know, just a brief interlude here is we're not sure where Ryan is. Ryan LeCompte is supposed to be joining us as well. He may have gotten the time wrong, but I'm really happy that we're having this conversation, because I think we can still address a lot of the issues. We may not be able to address directly the question of ayahuasca, but this is still really really great. So you mentioned these feelings in the body, and I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about how your experiences in therapy of your body in particular, how those connected with some of these sort of spiritual experiences that you are also having.
Yes, Michael and Annie introduced me to, I guess, what they call body work, which is part of the breath work stuff from the Stan Grof. And basically, I would lay down and just scan my body for any part that just felt maybe tense or any type of energy, I guess. My main thing was I would feel this kind of jitteriness in my legs and in my knees and my thighs. And so they would both, you know, put light kind of pressure against it, and leaning on my leg. And I would breathe, I visualize breathing into that area. And I mean, it was a powerful experience. You know, my leg would just start shaking even faster. And then felt like I wasn't shaking my leg, like it was uncontrollable. And then, you know, I guess while I'm there in my body, I felt like I was just kind of just out of it, thinking, why are you shaking like this? You look like some person in church when they're taking the demons out of you or something. And I realized my body needed to speak in these ways, and that there was tension and energy, I guess, locked up in these spots. And then I didn't even know that about the subtle energy bodies that consisted of, you know, us, and just about we're the physical body. And I would have these experiences where after shaking and stuff, it was like it moved, and then I'd feel it in my stomach, and I'd maybe feel some gas in my stomach, and then I would like burp, and then literally just feel better. And there's strange ways the body speaks, and it needs to release these tensions. And I started becoming aware that all these strange pains or aches that I'm feeling in my body speak to something higher, and not just little aches and pains, that there's different connections to that. So it made me a lot more aware of my body. And by doing that, I actually had my very first session, have a big change in my taste. I used to not like broccoli. I didn't eat my vegetables like I should. I started realizing how important it was that my body needed to be, as being a vessel, being out in the ocean, it needs to be a strong vessel so it doesn't start leaking, it can handle the storms, you'd say. And I realized I needed to take in more. And I really couldn't even stand the smell of steamed broccoli. And broccoli I couldn't stand it. And that was one of my wife's favorites. So she was always eating it around me, and I couldn't stand it. And it changed my taste, and I love it now. I mean, it changed a lot about how I eat and the things that I consume. So it helped me reconnect with my body and know the importance of my body and how just my body's health can affect my state of mind. So.
Oh, that's really incredible. I think a lot of people maybe who haven't had psychedelic experiences, they sort of see psychedelic experiences as taking us somewhere outside of ourselves. Talking about hallucinations or going to fantasy places or kind of disappearing, becoming less present. It seems like what you're saying is it actually kind of helped you ground yourself a little more in your body.
Yeah, this is something I can't speak for everyone, but I've learned on my own path that I'm really a living reflection of the cosmos. So by going inward, I can go out there, and it'll appear like I'm going out there. I grew up very having lucid dreams, and so I had those experiences like I'm flying elsewhere. But I knew that if you had a camera on me or something, I'm just laying in my bed. And before, I used to think that it was some part of me leaving my body, and there's just some dead body there laying, and I'm off somewhere. But I realized that we're going within us, and that there's these mirrors, I guess, or maps of the world outside within. And even when I went into my these therapy sessions with MDMA, and later practicing doing my own with mushrooms, I realized the visuals that I was doing, I was retreating inward, going more and more to my, I guess, true or sacred self, more into that heart center, and realized why. I also grew up kind of as, I guess, one of those sixth sense kids. I see dead people kind of thing. I was seeing things people weren't seeing, and it helped me understand how that was a part of me. It was not that it wasn't out there, but why I was seeing things I was seeing, and it really helped me respect myself more and see things differently. Is more, instead of seeing the darkness or cursed side of things, which are words just put into you by the outside world, I started knowing myself and trusting myself a lot more, and that really creates just this healing experience on the subtle level. So
yeah, it seems very different from the prescription pharmaceuticals, alcohol, things that people are given that seem to separate people from their bodies. It's a very opposite kind of move, right?
Very much.
Wow. Kind of along those lines, I wanted to make sure that we address the role of art here. Nicholas, I know you've gotten really into art. You've been posting it on Facebook, and I just love watching it. I'm into art myself, and I just really like seeing your process there. I've got one of Nicholas's pieces right behind me that he offered as a perk for our Indiegogo campaign last year. It's just, I was wondering, were you into art before your MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, and did that change in the process, and has that been part of your healing process, and if so, how?
Yes, I never really, I guess, drew and practiced drawing. I would just doodle and sketch, and there was nothing. Mainly like that kind of stick figure stuff, or stuff in your notebook when you're supposed to be paying attention in class and you're not. So that kind of stuff. And I would try and replicate things that I saw. It was when I was at the same time that I was going through my therapy in South Carolina. I was also going to school at Trident Tech, and I decided to take a introduction to drawing class. And it was during my first session that I had that I went back and I was actually having I think it was my final project at the time, where you had to draw a self-portrait. And after having that therapy session, you could literally see a huge change in my art. It was just I was a lot more into the detail, more present with myself. And it taught me, I didn't realize how I was doing some of these things. I was drawing on a level that was not introduction to drawing. And I started learning, the more I drew, the more I did things to learn how to trust myself and the things that came up. So it's almost like these mandala drawings, I guess, where you just kind of start in the middle and just go in circles and fill out the paper. If I'm trying to think about what to do and what to draw, I get in my way and I never end up drawing anything. When I kind of replicate my therapy sessions, I kind of take off some of my senses. I put on music headphones and I just let myself go, almost kind of automatic. And I realize it's my soul being put on paper. It's my consciousness being put on paper. And it's this form of therapy and this release I've learned how to use the tools that, I learned in my therapy sessions and put them into my my work. Like that piece you've shown beside you, this one.
Oh, great. Yeah, thanks.
A lot of people ask me with this text and stuff, because it looks like it's Sumerian and all these this stuff. Obviously I don't know what it means. It's not like it says anything. It's just been part of my automatic expression of it. But I've had people who have have taken mushrooms and talked to me, and they said, I saw your script everywhere and all that other stuff. And I've talked to them about Allison Gray, Alex Gray's wife, and their experiences, and she has drawn those same type of symbols. And
yeah,
I think I forgot her name, but she wrote the book about xenolinguistics.
Diana Slattery.
Yeah, yes. And when I read that, I started understanding really what I was doing. It's more of instead of the logical side of my brain that uses the words and stuff, it's the other part of my brain using speech. So they're more symbolic and more means something towards, I guess, myself. But for me, I've seen them, the movie Matrix, and that kind of gets brought up a lot in these talks with the psychedelics and stuff. But I just saw the script and I guess the code of the cosmos and, myself. I don't know how to explain it, but my desire has been to try and put this on paper as close as I can to what I see and experience. Because when I close my eyes, obviously it's a lot more intense, but it would get to the point in my therapy with MDMA where I was putting my hands up and I was seeing the things right in front of me that I knew Michael and Andy weren't seeing as well, but it was just so real how it was all imprinted everywhere, and the connections that I was seeing. I was just aware of a subtle universe that's always been there, and that it kind of made me think of I have cats and stuff. It makes me think about whatever it is they're seeing when they're staring and stuff. And you seeing somebody walk through my room right now? I get picked up on that animal connection with the spirit of everything, and you just start. It's one of those things that kind of connects you with everything, and you start to understand you get out of I guess you break your ego kind of death thing. You start to realize that connectivity you have with everything. And so the more I draw this stuff and other people say they see these things or they can relate to it, I think I'm speaking to the subconscious, something that we all share. And the more I've done that, my artwork, I've decided that I'm going to take it towards become a tattoo artist. And I want to put a lot of these script and stuff on the skin, kind of like your acupuncture points and stuff. And I read something in the xenolinguistics book where they were talking about doing that and putting it on the skin. And I think they were talking about mixing some neurotransmitter like serotonin or something with it, to where it would just be encoding on the flesh and stuff. So I thought that was pretty interesting, but that's just where my heart's been leading me to get this stuff put on the skin and be a tattoo artist. So it's really great when people they say they want to get that tattooed, and that's been a part of your soul, a part of your therapy and your healing. And to where it's touched somebody to where they're like, oh, I want that on my skin permanently for the rest of my life. It's like, wow, you feel like you're on the right path, I guess.
Yeah,
Art's
yeah.
been a big thing for me.
Yeah, maybe that your experience isn't just your own experience, and that some aspect of what you're experiencing can be shared with others.
Exactly. Helping me, I guess, bridge the gap between people when we think we're not separated, even though we are all very connected.
Yeah, certainly your ability to articulate your experience, which is quite phenomenal, about the experience you went through and your experience of your body and your art and what you're doing. I think a lot of people maybe lack the vocabulary to be able to talk about experiences like that. And I know just by how much you've shared of your experience and how many people have seen our crowdfunding videos and have read your work and have been learning about your experiences. I know that your experience has had a ripple effect and has helped others. I think maybe that's one way that...
I definitely love to give credit to my wife, Beverly, because I probably read all of 2 books in my life before I ever got and met her. And she's helped me, kind of like the Beauty and the Beast situation. She loved books, and I've read so much just trying to understand my experiences that I've had in the psychedelic experiences. And I've dived into Carl Jung and Alan Watts, and I've gotten into a lot of just reading, and hearing other people talk about their experiences has helped me relate and use, help my vocabulary, I guess, in explaining it. Even though I feel like I still struggle because what I see and experiences, I can't convey it through words. So that's why I have to resort to the art. I can't explain it, but I can regurgitate it on paper.
Yeah. How did you continue to integrate? Is it sort of what happened after the therapy sessions were over? Was that sort of the end of your healing process, and you've been thinking about that, or did you continue to seek out other practices, in addition to your art, to kind of help you reintegrate and move past your PTSD symptoms?
Well, I was, along with the mushrooms at the time, I was self-medicating with marijuana, and that didn't help me, I guess, with going under as much as some of the other psychedelics did, but it really did help me. It got me through school. It helped me cloud out all the negative thoughts, the gunfire, like I always like to say, and I was able to focus on my work and do my work. And that would also help me with my, my artwork. Once I went through the MDMA and I had that experience, I didn't have to rely on it as much, but I realized how I could repeat kind of like that therapy session, ceremonial wise, I guess, and smoke and prepare myself and get into a state to where I could just let my inner self flow out and not let Nicholas, I guess, get in the way. And then I went back to mushrooms. I do live on a farm, so they're just right outside. And wow. I started going back under and spending a lot of time trying to understand myself. I believe that we do share a similar map in all of us. While we are always kind of on a conscious level of thinking we are who we are, I know that there's this invisible thing we all kind of connect with, because I experienced that even in the military, how we could all come together as one in one mind, and sometimes not even speak, and learn how to move and connect. Just like if you watch us from above, we were all like ants who are just a bunch of drones using one mind. So I know that the same thing can happen for with peaceful methods and healing other people, that by healing myself and finding that healing, I can repeat that, to others, and through my own experiences, I guess, going under, I can relate to other people or across the board. I experienced a lot in war, but there's so many things that
I think we lost video.
Brad, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Jeremy. I think we may have lost Nicholas's video and audio.
Okay. He should be right back in a second, hopefully.
Yeah, he's he's out in Paducah with a a small dish.
Mm.
He's done pretty well thus far.
So yeah, great
Wow.
so far.
Brad, his ability to articulate his experience is really incredible.
Yes.
Really
Yes.
amazing. Had quite a few questions about more specifics, as you can see, his therapy, and just so many comments and stories shared. But he was, wow, that I found that really difficult to listen to when he was talking about his war stories. But you know, the story afterwards was so beautiful. The therapy he did with you guys. That it's okay.
It's powerful stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have a couple more questions for him along those lines too when we come back. I just wanted to say, just because Nicholas mentioned cannabis, mentioned marijuana, about the kind of difference there, about how the MDMA-assisted psychotherapy kind of helped him go in and to kind of go deep, whereas the marijuana was also helping him, but in a very different way, and more of a kind of helping him move past the symptoms and move on with his life and continue activities. And that's exactly what we've heard from countless veterans and other people with PTSD. And that's why MAPS is also getting ready to start a study of marijuana for symptoms of PTSD. Really not trying to shift somebody's fundamental relationship with their traumatic memories with marijuana, but rather just help people get on with their day-to-day life. Unlike MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, which is you really just take it, do it a couple of times, and then you have these lasting changes. With marijuana, that would be an everyday or a couple of times a day kind of treatment for people who maybe aren't either don't qualify for MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, or they have cardiovascular issues or neurological issues, and they can't use MDMA, or people who just aren't psychologically prepared to go through that kind of difficult reliving experience that happens with MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. So we're really excited for that study coming up too.
Yeah, it's amazing, Brad, what you're doing. I really, it's incredible. Do you use mushrooms in your in any of your studies and treatments?
We have done a little bit of research. We've done one partial study using psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy for anxiety associated with life-threatening illness. There's a lot of psilocybin research happening now, though. MAPS is not the sponsor of those studies. That's our colleagues at the Hefter Research Institute, and they're sponsoring studies at Johns Hopkins, at New York University, MDMA and psilocybin are the two compounds that are advancing the quickest. We're not sure which is going to get FDA approval first. It's kind of a friendly race to see who can come out with the revolutionary new psychedelic therapy treatment first. And psilocybin, that's being explored for not just use in psychotherapy, but also as a nicotine addiction treatment. Very, very promising work there. People are looking at exploring psilocybin and comparing it to meditation. We talked about a little bit about that in the last session with Alan Bediner.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. So many articles coming out about psilocybin. You're right.
Yeah, I'm wondering, maybe we should try to answer a couple of the questions. Obviously, I can't speak as a veteran who's experienced MDMA, but maybe there's some other questions, aspects about the study or the research that I might be able to answer for people while we're waiting for Nicholas and hopefully Ryan.
Yeah, great. Jeremy, do you want to dive in and see what we could ask Brad?
Yeah, actually, Brad, I don't know if you caught this part, but do you know how long Nicholas did the study?
The total duration?
Yeah.
They tend to be 3 months, a 3-month course with the introduction sessions, the introduction psychotherapy sessions at the beginning, the integration sessions at the end, and then the actual MDMA-assisted psychotherapy sessions spread out a couple of weeks apart in the middle.
I see.
And I will say for our first completed study of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD, which was published in the Journal of Psychopharmacology, you can download it at mdmaptsd.org if you're curious about seeing the paper. that was primarily in female survivors of sexual assault and abuse. We're really not just focused on veterans. We're doing a special Veterans Day session, and they're a growing cohort of people. There's so many veterans coming back with PTSD. We're also trying to get departments of defense, federal government support for our work, and working with the VA, or trying to work with the VA, and talking with VA psychiatrists and psychologists has been a great way forward to sort of jumpstart the public conversation about this work. But that first study, which was mostly in women who'd survived sexual assault and abuse, they'd had PTSD for an average of 19 years.
Oh, wow.
So we're only enrolling people at this point with chronic and treatment-resistant PTSD, people like Nicholas, who had tried other treatments, medications, psychotherapy, and they just didn't work. So those are the only people we're actually enrolling in our studies right now. So really they're the hardest cases of PTSD. Once MDMA-assisted psychotherapy is approved, we're hoping it won't be a last-ditch effort to help people with just the worst kinds of PTSD, people who experience suicidal thoughts. But really, I mean, if we could get people as soon as they come back, or before they come back, I'd love to ask Nicholas a little bit about what he thinks about treating active duty military personnel with this. That's a conversation we've had with some people.
Yeah, that's a really interesting conversation.
Yes. Let's see. Let me see if Nicholas is back yet. So this is another interesting question. This is from Sci-Farm Science. Hi. And they're asking, how about recommendations for students who are studying clinical psychology, where to find internships or how to go about finding your way into working with psychedelics in an environment where it is still taboo?
Yeah, great question. I'm sure we have a lot of people who are interested in exploring this, so it's a great question. Thank you. Well, there's a lot of ways to get involved in the field. There's working directly with psychedelics in research. For now, that's a pretty small field, primarily because funding is so limited. Once MDMA-assisted psychotherapy is approved and MAPS has a legally marketable pharmaceutical, as in MDMA, that we can sell and will be covered by insurance, we'll have a funding stream. So we'll be able to fund more research, open up more labs, get more researchers and their students involved in the studies. For now, it's still very small. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities once the treatment is approved for all kinds of therapists, people who are interested and have the skills to work in a clinical setting. So that's going to include clinical psychologists. It's going to include marriage and family therapists, various counselors. There's a lot of different ways that you can get involved in psychotherapy or therapeutic practice. Once it's approved, the compound itself will have to be prescribed by a physician. So you'll need an MD in order to actually prescribe it. But the person there in the room conducting the sessions can be somebody with any form of, or a lot of forms of different clinical psychology training or therapeutic training or counseling training, as long as they've also taken a training course provided by MAPS in how to best use the effects of MDMA combined with psychotherapy. As far as internships go, MAPS does sometimes have internships, both in our clinical research area and in our communications and marketing, in our development and fundraising. There's a lot of different ways. So it's not just science. You don't have to be a scientist or a therapist to get involved in this field. Rather, what I really encourage people to do is to hold on to that passion that they have for psychedelics, and then apply that knowledge through whatever profession they're also interested in. So if you want to get trained in marketing, then there's going to be opportunities for legally marketing psychedelic therapy in the future, and then you can apply that knowledge that you have to that. There's also fundraising, there's neuroscience, so there's going to be really opportunities across all professional spectrums that are involving psychedelics in some way. It's not just working directly with psychedelics in a lab. Hope that's helpful.
I think that definitely was helpful.
Yeah.
So there's
I
so
actually
many.
see it. I see another related question.
Yeah.
If you don't hear me. Leah has asked about the certification program at CIIS. CIIS is the California Institute for Integral Studies, a accredited school in San Francisco that trains people in various transpersonal approaches, psychological practices that could work well with psychedelic therapy. That's really exciting. CIS has a certification program in psychedelic therapy that they've just launched. That in and of itself is not going to be enough to actually work with psychedelics, or at least to be able to work with MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. You'll also need to take a specific training program in the therapeutic approach that MAPS has developed and is developing in these clinical trials. But it is a phenomenal way to start. There's other places that are focused on transpersonal psychology. Studying transpersonal psychology is a great way to learn about psychedelic experience and how to use it in therapy. For those who don't know, transpersonal psychology is different from traditional psychology in a key sense. It was developed by Stanislav Grof and his wife, Christina Grof, as a way to kind of work against or provide an alternative to Freudian psychoanalysis. And that traditional approach to psychology sees it tries to get people back to themselves. It sees people's stories about themselves as the truth about them. So, we're trying to say, hey, Jeremy, we're just trying to get you back to Jeremy. We're like, what is Jeremy? Who is Jeremy? Whereas transpersonal psychology is, well, maybe that concept of yourself is itself a concept. And maybe yourself is actually a much larger person than just this kind of narrow concept, and it has ties to your birth and your future and your dreams and your relationships. So transpersonal psychology is a broader approach to looking at who the person is that's going through therapy, and it seems to work very, very well. In fact, it was developed in alignment with psychedelic therapy, LSD-assisted psychotherapy in particular, to take into account all of these out-of-body or mystical or spiritual experiences that people are having.
That is really, really interesting. Thank you for that, because that's just taking it into a much bigger conversation, which we need to right now. Quickly, that we had a guest on one of our webinars who was a teacher of eco-psychology at Naropa University, which I imagine is similar kind of, transpersonal psychological study.
Yeah, Naropa is another excellent place to study this, yeah.
Exactly. So I'm sure your work at MAPS can align with their teachings too.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah. Jeremy, what else do we have out there? There's so many.
Oh, yeah. This might be something you can answer, Brad. It was a technical question about the actual therapy sessions, but how much does the therapist, what is the role? How much is the role of the therapist in these MDMA sessions? Do they sort of sit back and kind of let it do its thing, or do they stay very involved? What does that look like?
Yeah, great question. Great question. As I mentioned, there's a specific form of psychotherapy that we've been developing to maximize the effects of MDMA. As Nicholas was talking about, there are two therapists that he worked with. Their names are Michael Mithofer, who's a psychiatrist, and Annie Mithofer, who's a psychiatric nurse practitioner. They're a husband and wife team. Really interestingly, so again, from this transpersonal perspective, often people who are going through these, I'm getting a little bit of feedback.
Yeah, it's not too bad. It's not too distracting.
Okay, I'm going to try again.
Yeah,
it's echoing back.
It's echoing back. We could, Henrietta, you and I could just mute ourselves.
Sure.
Okay, trying again. Great. Okay, thanks, guys. Yeah, so there are two therapists. When we're dealing with PTSD, often what researchers are finding is that people with PTSD very commonly have previous traumas that they've been through. One of the key predictors of whether somebody might develop PTSD from a traumatic experience is whether they've been through traumatic experiences in the past. That can predispose somebody to developing PTSD. That is not everybody who goes through war, not everybody who survives an intense or dangerous situation develops PTSD. Tends to be certain people. So in the case of PTSD, very often what will come up is previous experiences with sexual assault or abuse. That's very common. It's way more common for kids to be sexually assaulted or abused than is acknowledged. In the professional literature, especially in the media, it's kind of pushed away because that's what happens with PTSD. People don't want to talk about it. That's what Nicholas was talking about too. So if that's going to come up, especially when people are having an intense, an emotionally intense experience under the influence of MDMA or another psychedelic in therapy, having a member of the opposite sex there can be very triggering. And it can shut people down. It can make them not willing to share their experiences. So to balance that out, we make sure that all of our MDMA-assisted psychotherapy sessions have two therapists, a man and a woman, there present. So in case somebody gets triggered by one, they can leave the room or just kind of disengage a little bit and they can talk with the other person. So the therapeutic form itself, it's a non-directive form of psychotherapy, and it's all based in a treatment manual that MAPS has been developing all through the course of our clinical trials. And that treatment manual is actually available online as a free resource. You can download it right now, maps.org/treatment manual, one word. You can download that right away. You can download it right now and read along if you'd like. It's a big, thick manual, and what it means, what non-directive means, is that the therapists are not telling the participant how to interpret their experience. Instead, they're letting it unfold. If the participant wants to go quiet, put on eye shades, again, like Nicholas was talking about, they're encouraged and welcome to do that. Sometimes even just a little bit of light touch. So just the therapist will put their hand on the participant's shoulder just to provide that kind of reassurance. But not telling them, oh, this is what your experience means, not forcing them to engage particular issues. In fact, the therapists and the participants always agree before the MDMA session starts, is that the therapists won't push the participant to talk about their traumatic experiences. But might kind of direct them that way, just might kind of remind them what they're there for at a certain point, because it's a therapy session. So far, that's never happened. The trauma always comes up. And that's something that's really interesting, especially about MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, is that there's something about it that's maybe connecting people with their bodies, producing some kind of a spiritual experience there, that is just bringing to light the trauma and helping people, encouraging them to engage with it. So please check out that treatment manual. It's really, really fascinating. It's not just a great resource for therapists and for patients. It's also a great resource for people who want to learn how to sit with people who are having any kind of difficult psychedelic experience. So that is actually a phenomenal model for not directing people, for sitting patiently with people. I also saw some questions about the specific techniques, the specific psychotherapeutic techniques that are used in that. Definitely check out the treatment manual. It lists all of those. Internal family systems is one of those approaches. Another one is certain forms of body work are also part of that. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a fundamental aspect of it. And then also, I know that Michael and Annie Mithofer, who ran the study, who are currently running the study that Nicholas was a participant in, they also use EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which has to do with how the eyes move and how it's connected to certain emotional and psychological experiences. So it's kind of a combined approach that's been sort of optimized for maximizing the effects of MDMA in therapy.
That's amazing. What a fantastic resource. Thanks, Brad. I'm going to really spread that amongst my friends.
Great.
I mean, it's fantastic that you've put that together. Brian just here came up with a comment that I was thinking exactly the same. It was making me think about Nicholas's story of his leg shaking and his body needing to speak. You know, that was interesting. He's asking, can you talk about the leg healing that Nicholas talked about and what exactly was happening?
Oh, I would love Nick. Yeah, I'd love Nicholas to be able to.
Yeah, that exactly. Like, well, he was talking about it, releasing, you know, the subtle energy bodies and where the trauma is trapped, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, just, you know, what I could say about just from the veterans that I've spoken to and the people in our studies, what we've seen, you know, is you know, and also the pharmacological effects of MDMA. Is that people feel more connected to their bodies. MDMA is not LSD, it's not psilocybin, it's not ayahuasca, which unfortunately might not be able to get into a lot of detail in this session. We will be, just since Ryan might not be able to join us this time, we will have an opportunity to speak in detail about ayahuasca in particular in our next session. Discovering plant medicines with Sita Mayasita and Jane Strait. They're both experts in that field. As far as MDMA goes and the experience of the body, you know, this is one way that MDMA-assisted psychotherapy is so different from the conventional pharmaceutical approaches to treating PTSD. The way that antipsychotics or antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications or alcohol separate people from their experience is totally opposite what's happening with MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. Also with MDMA, people don't tend to have extreme auditory or visual hallucinations. People do tend to have profound emotional experiences, profound spiritual experiences, or connective experiences, either with themselves or with the therapists or the people around them that can be interpreted in a lot of ways. So Nicholas has talked about his confrontation with his own inner demon, and that's an emotional experience, but it can also be translated into a visual experience when people's eyes are closed, especially if somebody's an active dreamer. That can happen a lot. But MDMA does seem to bring people more fully into their bodies. This is why people like going out and dancing on MDMA, because you can feel your body a lot more with a greater sense of awareness. So if there are tensenesses, if there's injuries, especially if there's tense points or places where people are holding tension, you know, we connect our bodies to our memories, and by releasing those tense parts of our bodies, we can also release aspects of our own psyches in a similar way. So by drawing our attention to it, to those places in our body, we can process those emotions. And of course, having the therapist there to help direct the attention to the body and kind of help people, help participants stay with those feelings rather than moving away with them, which is another aspect of the therapy. That's probably what Nicholas was talking about.
Yeah, he totally really described that experience incredibly well. And thanks for what you've just said too. It makes me think, you know, really it's all about, it's integrative, you know, it's integrating the experience and not separating yourself from it. And that Buddhism and all the great Buddhist teachers and old traditions talk about that, right? You've always got to integrate the shadow, you know, whatever it is. You can't.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is really pioneering something that's very, very ancient.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as far as you know, being as specific as possible for all of our participants, you know, we're trying to take something home from this. Not all of us have PTSD, but we all have difficult memories. We all have pasts. We all have parts of our lives that we want to grow from and we don't want to be stuck in. We have habits that we want to release. All of us do. So, you know, I think that's one of the key lessons here is that the psychedelic experience doesn't have to be an out-of-body experience. That there is something profoundly spiritual happening when people get more grounded in their bodies. And that's something that we're sitting here in front of a computer screen, all of us, we live in a world of hyper-connectivity, but also hyper-dissociation. We're communicating, we're engaging, but our bodies are more or less stationary. We're not moving a lot. We're experiencing a lot, but we're not moving a lot. So there's a sense of alienation, I think, that a lot of us feel, especially living in contemporary society, and may have something to do with the prevalence of PTSD these days, is that we're encouraged to be separate from our bodies. We're encouraged to sit and watch TV and sit in class and sit in our desks and not get connected with our bodies. So really anything that's going to connect us more with our bodies can ground us more in our immediate experience and can therefore be a spiritual experience.
Yes, excellently put, Brad. Couldn't have said it better. I mean, amazing. You're exactly right. Body intelligence is where it's at. Mm-hmm. It is. And that's what you're doing. Jeremy, do we have Nicholas back on?
Not yet, but he did just email me saying he's in a bad storm right now, so that must have got the internet. But he's on his phone, and he's going to try to log on through the phone option. So I'm going to keep an eye out for him in the participants list.
Well, since we started about 10 minutes late, maybe we could go another 10 minutes. Would that be all right with you?
That'd be fine.
Brad, you can go for as long as you want. Of course, like we've had people go over like an hour and a half. It's whatever you feel you need to impart what you need to impart.
All right, great. Well, this is a fantastic session, and we're getting great questions. So
yeah, we really are. It's just been absolutely incredibly informative. It's making me think about so many things. Jeremy, let's dive into some more questions from people out there. Or if you see one, Brad, let's all have a look.
Yeah, there's been so many. Thank you all.
I know, just trying to find something with a slightly different angle.
Somebody asked about how many milligrams of MDMA. We're exploring a range of different doses. The standard dose that we're using is 125 milligrams of MDMA, and then that's followed 2 to 3 hours later by an optional half dose, so an optional dose of 62.5 milligrams, and that's up to the agreement of the participant and the therapist. So if they want to extend the effects, they can take that additional half dose. I'll just say that adding that additional half dose of MDMA after a couple of hours doesn't tend to increase the intensity of the effects, but rather just to extend what we call the therapeutic window, is to extend the effects so that there's more time to engage. So that's the standard 125 followed by 62.5. We are also looking at 75 milligrams followed by a half dose, and also 100 milligrams followed by a half dose. And we're seeing a range of different effects. We were expecting when we first started our phase 2 research about 5 years ago that the 125 milligrams would be most effective because it's sort of the standard recreational dose. But we found people having phenomenal effectiveness with only 75 milligrams. So it really depends on the individual. I'll also say, just because ecstasy and Molly are everywhere right now and just getting more popular, it seems, is that just want to emphasize we're using pure MDMA that's made in a legal, controlled pharmaceutical manufacturing facility, and most of the ecstasy and Molly that's purchased on the street, on the black market, even if it's like only a couple degrees removed, less than 50% of it actually contains any MDMA at all. It's not just that it contains some or very little, it's that over half of it doesn't have any MDMA at all. So ecstasy and Molly, we're often talking about a totally different compound, and you just can't expect to get the same kinds of effects finding it on your own as you would in a clinical trial.
Yeah, totally. Like a bastardized sort of product. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert said something here. He said, could you file for some patent protection on the dosing you just described?
Well, MDMA is off of patent. So there's no way to patent it. MAPS can't directly profit off the long-term sale of MDMA. It will be a generic medicine when it's approved. For those who don't know the history, fascinating history, and there's a really great book called Ecstasy, The Complete Guide by Julie Holland, which goes into some of this history too. MDMA was first patented, first synthesized in 1912. So over 100 years ago, and patents expire after 25 or 30 years, and they can't be repatented. So in the immediate first 3 to 5 years after the approval, the FDA approval of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD, because it's the first time that MDMA will have been approved for use in a specific medical condition, MAPS will have a 3 to 5 year exclusivity on the marketing and sale of MDMA. And that'll enable us to get a significant income and jumpstart a lot of other research and stop having to ask for donations so much. But after that, it will be a generic medicine, and any legal pharmaceutical manufacturer will be able to manufacture it and distribute it for use in psychotherapy.
Wow. Yeah, Robert was saying, I don't know if you saw this, but he said you can file on dosing, but not molecular entity. Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. I'll definitely pass that on to our research team.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
yeah.
Let's see.
Although I will also add that MAPS has no interest in patenting.
Yes.
We want it to be as available as possible. We want as many people to be able to access it as possible. So we would never patent it for the purposes of increasing prices or decreasing availability or anything like that.
Sure.
But I will pass it on. That's really interesting information. Hello, Nicholas. You survived the storm.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, it's
Great.
still raining out here, but we got it all worked out. So hopefully
Welcome back.
Yeah, great to have you back. So
Also just heard back from Ryan. Our fears of time zone mix-ups were
accurate.
Were accurate, yes.
Okay.
I told him to hop on though. I mean, just come on for a few.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. We could go another 15 minutes. I'd love to go another 15 minutes here.
Yeah.
Nicholas, we've just been answering a bunch of questions, mostly the specifics of the trial, the dosage of MDMA, and so on. So I'm wondering, maybe we could find a question specifically for Nicholas.
Yeah, let's do that. Jeremy, let's some specific Nicholas question. Yeah.
What was the question, Henrietta, you were mentioning before? That would be good. Yeah.
Somebody wanted to know about the experience of your leg, which actually fascinated me too, that when your leg started shaking and you mentioned, the body needed to speak. I wanted you to sort of talk a little bit more about that.
Oh, about doing the body work?
Yeah, sort of how the body released its trauma. It's very interesting, as if you were a separate doing its thing. Yeah.
Besides just my leg having a twitch, some of the other things where I would notice is I would have groans, kind of like animal noises and growls, and I would let those kind of growls come up, and then sometimes as these things would come up, there'd also be thoughts or feelings associated with it. And at one time, just a lot of anger and rage came up, and I felt the need to just, I guess, scream into a pillow. And so I told them I felt like I needed that, and so I just rolled over and screamed in the pillow, and I just kept on like screaming and yelling, and then I just felt, I started punching the pillow and stuff, and remembering, I guess, feeling that rage and that anger that I felt in combat, like whenever sea bass had gotten hit and wounded, and I just wanted to get some, I guess, retaliation or something. And I was just letting that go and the release, and it was beautiful because I no longer felt the anger and rage after I just kind of breathed and went out of it. And it was very foreign for me because, like I said, I felt like it was like something you see people getting exercising their demons or something. It just was not aware that it wasn't just thoughts that come up. It's not just mind, that sometimes the body actually needs a voice too, and it speaks the way it speaks to you. It can be kind of strange and foreign if you're not aware that it does need to speak and release itself sometimes. So
Thank you.
I do have another question. It's a question that we have on the course page, and in case some of our participants wanted to explore that a little more, I thought I'd ask. The question is, can psychedelics change how we think about war and conflict? Since we're speaking, surrounding your experience as a veteran, Nicholas, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that. If sort of what your feeling was about going into war or joining the military, if you didn't know you were going to be deployed at the time, and just sort of whether your experience shifted how you thought about your participation in that.
it did. Before I was, I wasn't going in because I wanted to go over there and fight or kill anybody. It's not like I had that mentality. I really, I wanted to serve, but one of the things I had to realize in my therapy was that I was going over there, I guess, to sacrifice myself, and I wasn't appreciating myself and loving myself like I needed to. And so I guess I had felt that I honestly felt like I was going to go over there and die, especially on my second deployment. And I had to, when I went through my therapy, there was this, like I said before, there's a lot of forgiving that goes on with how you felt during those situations. But I had to accept that there was a part of me that, and I guess, enjoyed that conflict, that the fact that I was put into like a Coliseum-like situation to where it was kill or be killed, and I came out in the situation of the person, instead of saying I killed the other person, but it is more or less that you come out of that arena alive, and it just kind of, it feeds this thing where you become almost like this, feel like a Superman, and it can be dangerous to the mind, feel like you're untouchable. The therapy, since I was kind of hating myself and who I was, I actually have a picture here that kind of like sums up my feelings and stuff about that. I was,
is that you, Nicholas?
I felt like this. Yeah, this was me when I was in Ramadi. I'm standing on base and stuff. That's why I have my helmet and everything off. And but I didn't take many pictures over there. I didn't really have the opportunity to do it while I was out. But I was able to take a couple photos where I just kind of wanted to sum up my feelings and stuff. And I felt like my mind was kind of lost to the desert over there. When I got my mind back through the therapy and MDMA started, I guess what happens is your emotional side's turned off and you're very logical, very suck it up until you get back to the base kind of thing. And there's no room for the emotions. And the MDMA turned my emotions back on and flooded me with my emotions. So I had to go a while after my therapy was all over. Over the past couple of years, actually, I've been dealing with these new connections and feeling things more and stuff. And I've understood that, or I believe that if I had to fight again for a necessary cause, I could do that and trust that there's medicines within my environment naturally that could help me get my mind back. But it really did make me think a lot about what I experienced over there. Instead of seeing all the negative stuff, I was able to see the different perspectives. Like I started thinking about the Iraqi people and like how sometimes they would just be happy with, and it seemed like they had nothing. Or they were living in these situations that just seemed like, well, I mean, from our American perspective, it would be kind of like slum living, but yet they were happy. And it helped me realize that just, I guess, learn about happiness and how it's not attached to your material life. And it really does have to do a lot more with community and connection. And with PTSD and some of our veterans, we cut ourselves off from everybody else. And we say, I don't want to talk about these. I don't want to talk about this. But then we get around other veterans and we talk about our war stories, but we seem to still have this level of, we're still talking about it with our armor on, while we might, you know what I mean? If that makes sense. We're still holding back those things. The MDMA is just like walking into this like beautiful spa, and just shedding every bit of your armor as you just slowly gonna go into the water and just really release all that stuff and talk about it, not as a Marine, you know, not as a sage, just as this, you know, the person you came into this world, you know, as a boy that I came into this world, I felt like my innocence, I guess, was stolen from having to participate in the things that I did, kill, and have my, you know, my hands stained with blood and watch my friends die and burn. That there was some innocence that was stolen from me that would never return. And it helped me, I guess, forgive myself and realize that you can always return to that innocence just by returning to that love and loving yourself again. I mean, once I started really caring for myself instead of punishing myself for the things that I went through, big world change, drastic change. And so, and I might not have to do, might be any science behind it, but growing my hair out instead of having to cut my hair and shave all the time like I did in the military, that has myself back. It's like my antenna.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, and I just want to say, because I mentioned it when you were dealing with the storm, Nicholas, is that there's, you know, not everybody develops PTSD, but we all have difficult memories. We all have aspects of ourselves and our habits and our past that we're hoping to heal from or deal with or improve in some way. And by the way that you've reflected on your experience, I know it's helping me. It's helping a lot of us who are listening. So thank you.
I feel like I get a lot of healing too by talking about this stuff. Like I said, we as veterans sometimes we don't want to talk about this stuff, and not being afraid to talk about, I guess, some of the gruesome aspects of what I've seen and experienced. Just I feel like it helps other people. Why it might not be like war situations, who have experienced traumatic things, open up and talk about that stuff too. When you said, you know, when you say this is what I've been through, and they're like, oh wow, then a relation kind of happens. They want to relate to it, and then I guess by healing myself, I've been able to demonstrate that there is a hope. I mean, from all the traumatic things that I've had to witness, being able to recover from that shows that there's potential to recover from so much across the board. So
yeah,
I feel like I was drugged through the muck, and I went through some of the things that I went through so that, I mean, I could be here now and tell the story. If I was very, I struggled with suicide, like real bad, because you feel hopeless. Like there's nothing that can stop it. And when I had my therapy, you know, I chose to live again. And if I didn't, I wouldn't be here now being able to help, you know, people. I would have, by taking my life, I guess I would have been, excuse me, getting choked up. I would have been abandoning everyone else. And you have this, you have this thing where you don't leave people behind, and it doesn't matter if they're, you don't have to be military, you know.
For
so
sure.
I'm getting choked up.
Well, yeah. On the note of you know, sharing this process with others, Nicholas, and I see Bev's hand there. She's definitely been part of it. Been definitely been part of the process. Yeah, maybe do you feel comfortable coming on and waving, saying hi?
Hello, Bev.
Yeah, awesome.
Hi.
Hey, Bev. Great. We have another question. You know, I'd really like to ask this. How would you approach a vet who might not even entertain the idea of using a psychedelic or any other form of medication, or somebody who might, you know, how might we talk to other vets in a way that might get them to open up and try therapy? You know, even if it's not psychedelic therapy, even if they can't get into a clinical trial at this point, even if they can't wait 6 years until 2021 for the therapy to be approved, you know, how might we start that conversation with somebody, a man or a woman who's experienced this in combat?
Well, I do know with, as as veterans, we seem to talk to each other a lot more about these experiences. So I think by me being a veteran and going through this and finding the healing that I've had a lot of my veteran friends who talk to me about it and are interested. And the hardest things for me is the fact, like you said, it's not just available for everybody to now. And I've returned, I guess, to the what I do have available to me is the mushrooms, and I understand what's important is that experience of how to get yourself, I guess, to go under and find these things within. And so that can be, in my belief, it can be reproduced with mushrooms and stuff. And I've had a lot of people, friends, reach out to me and want to. They're looking for this kind of help, and it's kind of hurt me. It's kind of like that survivor's guilt again with the PTSD. And now I feel like I've gotten this healing that everyone deserves, and it's not, can't just get it to everyone that needs it. So I have been helping some friends, and they come over, to my place and stuff, and we've gone, beautiful woods and everything, and we just talk about these things. And veterans with veterans is something that really helps. You already get comfortable enough to open up, and just by me showing and what I've done and talk about what I've done and my acceptance of these psychedelics when I wasn't someone who ever used them before, especially not before my military experience. But when there is no hope, and when you feel like there's no hope in the medications and you can't find it at the end of a bottle, and you feel like you get to the point where you're only going to find some solution at the end of a barrel, I think when you start to present to someone that there is a light, there is some hope, and that this medicine can do it, like you have the potential of I'm going to put that bottle down, put that put that pistol down. I had my case. Once it gives you like a light, and that's all. That's all you need. I remember in the military, one of the things that couldn't stand was going on these runs, and they wouldn't let you know when it was going to end. They'd be running you around base, and you think you're about to be done, and you just wouldn't know when the end is. But sometimes when they say just one more mile, you get this energy again, this hope that, okay, I can push through this. And the MDMA did that for me. It was this experience where the light came on enough to where I knew that there was this light, and that I was just bumping into things because I didn't have the light, didn't have the clarity that I needed. And as the drug goes off, gets out of your system and stuff, there's like this lasting light that stays because you've discovered your inner light. And when you learn how to, I guess, breathe into it, so like I have, you can ignite that light, that fire again, and bring it with you, I guess, out into the world, out into the darkness. And so it's kind of what I've learned to do. And I really, like I said, it kind of really gets me choked out. I wish it was available. I wish there weren't so many hoops that we have to run through, but I'm glad that I was able to go through the study so that I could, I guess, jump through those hoops to show this works, and this can, this has the potential to help. So I guess it's my giving back for being blessed enough to receive the healing that I did. So,
well, thank you.
Thank you so much. Really pioneering, both of you. It's really, no, seriously, it's massively important. It's really a powerful story you have with us. Everything you shared. Thank you.
Maybe we can do one more question and then wrap up.
Yeah, sure. You too.
I've been so captivated by Nicholas's response, I haven't been reviewing the questions.
I know, actually.
Anybody want to squeeze in one last question?
Yeah, Jeremy, what I couldn't.
Any pressing? Yeah.
Because I was just totally there.
There's a lot of commentary just on what we've been saying. Oh, here we go. Let's see.
Just you made us think so much about, just trauma and the nature of it and how we heal from it. It's just incredible.
There are some questions about the drug effects of MDMA. I'll just refer you to mdmaptsd.org which has the currently available information about how MDMA is working in the context of psychotherapy. I will add that the FDA does not need us to know how MDMA is working in psychotherapy. It only needs to know that it's safe, so there's no significant negative effects, or at least that those negative effects balance out with the potential positive effects, and that it's effective for what it's claimed to be effective for. But there's no need from the FDA's standpoint, from the approval standpoint, to know how it's working. Although there is a lot of interesting work happening there, neuropsychopharmacology, neuroscience, brain scanning, that's teaching us more about what's happening with MDMA in the brain and the body.
Thanks, Brad. That's great. Any other questions that you want to get in before the end?
Nicholas, can you see the questions?
Hold on, let me pop this stuff up here.
Yeah.
The Q&A.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just click the little Q&A down there. Somebody's asked for you to choose one. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Super.
And so just scroll through these questions here.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not very computer savvy.
No, don't worry.
That's good.
Don't worry.
We can wait.
We can wait. And there's a couple of questions just sitting.
We're hanging out, waiting for your next words.
Here's this one.
I am.
And then there's this
I see one that has exposure to war given you any valuable lessons about the human condition. Whenever I was blown up, the last thing that I remember happening was we were all laughing.
Oh.
What's going on?
Oh no.
Cliffhanger.
Cliffhanger. Oh my God, what's he going to say? Not many of us, get to be on the verges of being blown up in America.
That's true, fortunately.
Yeah. Wow. So,
kind of curious about what he might say about self-healing, tips on self-healing with mushrooms. That's a great question.
Also, while we're waiting, as far as Ryan goes, Ryan LeCompte, who was going to be joining us, but there was some confusion about the time zone. One of the challenges of having internet meetings is I'm going to ask if he is actually available to join us for our next session on December 2nd. I don't know if he will be, but we'll be talking about healing with plant medicines in that one. And he has experience with ayahuasca and healing from PTSD. So it may be that he can join us for that one. If not, perhaps our last session, because I would just really like to give him an opportunity to participate.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
Yeah, that would be superb. Definitely.
We're handling the technical difficulties with such grace. Thank you.
Well, I mean, how can you not follow Nicholas with some kind of you just got to acceptance? Yeah, that's the name of the game. After listening to him, I feel like my life might have changed.
Could meditate in a lightning storm.
Yeah, I mean, really. Yeah, just really what he came back from. Brad, it's amazing what you're doing. It's amazing.
It's phenomenally powerful, yes, and definitely very rewarding work. Just the amount of amazing feedback and hope that we get to see.
Honestly, it's just going to go from strength to strength, and we need it now, this time, more than ever.
Oh, Nicholas.
Hey, great.
It's still storming here.
Yeah.
That's okay. Welcome back. You were just beginning to tell your story about that question about what was it again? Has your experiences given you any insight into the human condition?
And you were
yes.
talking about what happened to you just before you were next to an experience.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Whenever I was blown up and everything had went black in the void, everything kind of slowly came back, and I was watching things move in slow motion. I remember watching the flames like just slowly curl. But yeah, my mind was racing like the speed of light, like I was Superman or something. I was very smart and intelligent. And I remember hearing earlier there was mortars that were shot at us, and they landed real close to our vehicle. And at the time of being blown up, we were waiting on our relief. We were about to be done sitting in that spot. And, mind, what must have been one of
He's gone again.
Uh,
We're dealing with
someone
this.
somebody recommended that we have Nicholas record it.
Yeah,
Tell us later. That would be wonderful.
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
it is, just to get that story.
Yeah, great. Just so we're not hanging on the edge of our seats forever.
Well, and also it's a pretty big question, and sounds like he's got some insights into that.
Yeah, great. Well, let's make that happen. It's getting a little late on the East Coast, I know. So maybe we could wrap it up and rejoin next time.
Brad, thanks so much.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you, Nicholas, if you're hearing this later. What an amazing story, and you guys are doing amazing work. Very powerful, and I really hope that that we don't have to wait till 2021 for this stuff to be available, but hey, I'll take that too. That'll be momentous when it happens. So
there could be a couple of regulatory successes that make that happen a little bit faster. There's some programs with the FDA. Expanded access is one. There's a couple of ways that we might be able to accelerate it. So that 2021 estimate is kind of the worst case scenario, assuming that we keep getting phenomenal results and we get the funding we need. I'll just say, by participating in this webinar, everybody's helped make that happen, since part of the proceeds are helping fund that research. And then also just to complete the studies, we still need to raise about $23 million, which is a very, very small amount. In pharmaceutical drug development terms, many pharmaceutical companies need to invest $1 billion or more in order to develop drugs that are basically the same as existing drugs and have minimal effectiveness. So $23 million for this radical new approach to psychotherapy is kind of the deal.
Yeah, totally. I think you're going to do it. I don't think you'll be waiting that long, because our world is radically shifting. We're going to need this seriously. So got to hang on in and keep going.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be back again on December 2nd. Is that right?
yes.
That's
okay, great.
So skipping a couple of weeks.
Yeah. One next week for the Drug Policy Alliance conference in Washington, D.C., and the following week for Thanksgiving.
Fantastic. And then we'll see if we can get Ryan, everybody out there.
Yeah, we'll do our best to bring Ryan on for a future session too.
But you know what? It was so powerful with Nicholas and yourself, just really talking as you did.
Nicholas is one of my favorite human beings. He's just done so much for this whole.
That is mine.
Yeah.
Amazing. I don't think I've heard such a beautiful story so honestly shared.
Yeah. Well, again, much more of his story is here in Acid. I'm not sure if it's backwards or not, but this is okay. Great. This is again on the MAP store. Proceeds helping support the research. Nicholas's story is phenomenally told in here as well.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you, everyone. Thanks also for joining the Slack forum, which is now very busily chatting away. We have about 32 people on there, and just keep sending me your email after this session. Just send me an email, jeremy@evolver.net, and I'll make sure that you're on there. You get an invite. So, all right.
Yeah, thank you, Henrietta. Thank you, Jeremy, very much. This was great.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you so much, and everybody.
Henrietta.
We'll see you soon.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.